Welcome back. This is part 2 of your political parties, and let's get started. So we're going to talk about the components of political parties. This is something that you did or do an activity on in class, but I want to make sure we've kind of got it. So first and foremost, a component of the political parties is the formal party organization. So this would be the national committee. This is the group that's going to run the conventions. This is the one that's providing support. There's going to be providing money. They're going to mobilize voters as well. But they are running the day-to-day national organization. They are, planning the party platform and planning the national convention every 4 years. You then have the party in government. These are the individuals who have been elected to government. Those that are, members of the party in Congress, like the House of Reps or the senators, at the state level, as well. So we can't forget about the state level when we talk political parties, because that is also part of their organization. So the party that's in government, that's trying to get policy passed, that is a part of their platform. And then finally, that's the party and the electorate. So these are the people who claim to be of that party, who then in turn will go vote and get their party members elected to office. So the party and the electorate they're going to elect people to government, and they're going to supply money to the national organization. They're going to supply support. They're going to supply information. All right, so let's talk about party structures. So you start off with the National Committee. So these are the groups that's going to establish and work at the national level, the focus on, the national view of the party. They're looking nationwide, their party overall. They're going to be doing polling. They're going to be doing the recruiting of members, or trying to find recruitment of members, or help state officials do that. And they are the planning of the convention every 4 years. You have the campaign committee. So there's a campaign committee that will help within each organization that will be helping campaigns. They could be at the state level, they could be at the national level, but there will be official party members that are a part of each of the major campaigns to try to ensure that they are successful and they get a win on election day. You then have the state central committee, and these oftentimes will operate at a very independent level from the national committee, because what the state needs and the state view of the party is completely different. And if you think about this, the Republican Party in California is going to be different than the Republican Party in Oklahoma. They are different people. They have different demographics. They have a different scenario. And so when we say, a Republican in California, they're not going to be similar to a Republican in Oklahoma anyway, so they need to respond differently. The same can be true for Democrats. Democrats in Oklahoma will have different issues that they need to focus on than a Democrat, say, in California or Oregon or Washington or New York, very Democratic leaning states. But the State Central Committee is going to be focused on what are the issues in their state that they should be concerned with. And they don't always match up with the national. You then have county committees. So there's a, Democratic Cleveland County Committee. There's a Democratic or a Republican Cleveland County Republican Party. And they will recruit local. They will support local candidates for local office, their state office, your school board if it's non-partisan, or if it's a partisan election, or your city council, your counties. If any of those are partisan, then the county committees are going to be involved there, supporting them, helping them out, mobilizing voters, organizing, what do they call, leaflet drops, like going door to door, those sorts of things. And then you have your local committee, and the local committee is going to be for the ward or for the precinct. So we in Oklahoma, we vote at a precinct, which is a part of a ward, which is part of the county, which then is part of a state. So there is, in some states, they will have local committees. Oklahoma is not does not use the local committees. It's usually the county committee that we go to. National committee versus the national convention. So the national convention is where the parties roll out. It's a 4-day advertisement for the party. They roll out their platform. They highlight their, potential up and comers for their recruiting status, getting their names out there. They officially nominate their presidential candidate and their vice presidential candidate, and they give speeches. The national committee plans all that, but then runs the organization between national committees or conventions, excuse me. All right, so party system. So what you need to understand is that through the history of the United States, we've gone through periods in which one party has dominated the election cycle at the national level. So we first start off with the Democratic Republicans, the Jeffersonians versus the Federalists. The Democratic Republicans really dominate this after 1800. The Federalists die out by 1816, so it's the Democratic Republicans that tend to hold this era. After that, following that, we then, starting in 1828, we get the Democrats, the Jacksonian Democrats versus the Whigs, in which the Jacksonian Democrats are winning more elections than the Whigs. I think the Whigs won like one national election. That was John Tyler was the running mate. Oh my God, I'm drawing a blank. Tippecanoe was his nickname. William Henry Harrison. There it is. All right. So starting in 1860, it's Democrats versus Republicans. From 1860 to 1896, this is the Republican era. Okay. It's a Republican era and starts with the election of Lincoln, goes through 1869, and then at the start of the century, hallmark on that is that it's close competition. They are very close, but the Democrats tend to pull it out. The next one is the Democrats versus the Republicans, and this is going to be Republican dominance. So for that 40-year period, it is Republicans are dominating. The Democrats only win the presidency like one time during that time period. Of course, in 1932, we get the election of FDR, which then moves us into the next one, which is the Democrat dominance on this one. And so this I'm going to showing you is the political parties at the time. So notice we start Democrats versus Republican very often. In 1932 through 1968, we have a Democratic dominance. In the Democratic versus Republican starting in 1968, we don't know when that period is end. We're still kind of in it. And the hallmark is divided government, which means that one party is not dominating control of both houses, both houses of Congress and the White House. There's a split oftentimes that you see, and we are still in that. So sometimes Congress is divided itself, and sometimes it is the White House of one party and Congress of the other party, and we are still in that in 2020. Okay, so when we talk party systems, elections. So what has kind of switched us in the party system? First off, you're going to have a critical election. So some like big thing like a pandemic or a depression has caused a critical election, and that is typically when you see the party system switch on that. Now you can have de-aligning elections, which means that people are not picking political parties, that they are becoming independent, and this is what we've seen since 1968, in which people are not picking a party. They're just not, they're like not going to do it. This is de-aligning. They're not aligning themselves with a political party. They're just like, nope, I'm going to be independent. I don't agree with either one of you that much, so I'm just not going to pick you guys. You can have realigning elections, and what that means is that people move from one party to the other. They're not de-aligning themselves. They are sticking with a party. They're just like, you know what? I've been with you, Democratic Party. This is the Southern strategy from the Republicans was to, get the Southerners to see that the Democratic Party no longer represented them. And so you had a lot of white Southerners said that Democrats, I've been with you for a couple of decades, several decades. My, family's been with you for a couple of decades. You don't represent me anymore. So now I'm going to switch my alliance and I'm going to become a Republican. That's a realigning election. And typically we don't see those. Those are over several elections. Deviating elections means something deviates from the norm. In 2016, we saw that Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin deviated from what they had always been. They were very blue collar. They were very kind of Democratic strongholds. People referred to it as the blue wall. Those deviated from that. They did not vote. Majority did not vote for Hillary Clinton, the candidate, the Democratic candidate. They voted for the Republican candidate, Trump. And so Trump won states that typically were Democrat. That's a deviating election. Okay, so a deviating election could, eventually lead to a realigning. You might see a realigning, but you don't know that for a couple of elections. Sometimes it's just an anomaly. Reinstating elections means people have gone back to what they had. Like we're going back to what the tradition had been. So in 2020, we saw that Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin went back to voting blue. Not overwhelmingly blue, but they voted back on the Democratic side. Maintaining elections is just an election that maintains what we have always seen for the last several elections, whatever tradition we are in. The states are voting based on what they've always been voting on for the last several decades. Nominations. So conventions and caucuses. So you will hold a convention to nominate a candidate. So this is what originally the political parties did. This is what Jackson brought in. We then switched to, sometimes there was a caucus in which people got together and they nominated. But they do nominations. That's the point of a political party, is to help narrow down, and they officially nominate their candidate either through a convention or through the caucus system. They can help choose through the direct primary. So people go and directly vote for their candidate. And we've talked about these when we talked elections. So you can have a closed primary where if you're registered to vote with a party, then that's who you get to vote in their primary. You get to help that party choose their candidate. Open is you walk in and you get to choose, regardless of how you are registered, you get to pick which party you want to vote in on that. And then you also have the blanket, the wide open, the jungle, the Cajun. This is where they just list everyone. Typically their political affiliations will have to be on there. That's unconstitutional not to put them on there. And then the top two vote getters, doesn't matter what party they're from, will go to the general. So why two parties? And we've kind of addressed this before, but we're going to address it again. First off, we have two parties because we are single member districts. You only have one representative for a district. So instead of Oklahoma, we have 5 representatives, and the 5 representatives are just going to be elected from a big group of people. We only get one, and you get nothing for second place. So because we have single member districts, that encourages a two-party system because you get nothing for second place. If we had proportional representation, whereas, hey, you want to run for office? Great, you got to be in the top 5. We could potentially have more political parties than just 2, because you'd have to work to get a coalition, essentially. Restrictive ballot access laws. We have very restrictive access ballot laws. You have to register. A lot of states require you to potentially pick a party. You don't get to have a say in who the party is, who the nominee is for those, unless you are a member. But it's, we have restricted ballot. If you're not registered with the party, you can't participate in the primary in a lot of states. And then if you're not registered at all, you don't get a vote on voting day. The role of third parties is very limited. There's a lot of barriers for them. so they act as a safety valve. So in 2016, there were a lot of people who probably would have never voted third party, chose to vote third party because they wanted to send a message to the two main parties that, hey, you're going down a path we don't like. You're picking candidates that we are not suitable for. We're going to go with third party. So it's like the safety valve to keep the two main parties kind of a little bit in line. They do an issue. They will take an issue and kind of co-opt it for their own use and make it a big deal, and they drive voters to them because of this issue, and they can take a controversial stand because they're not a main party, and winning an election is a kind of a long shot. They also act as a spoiler. They will spoil the vote. If a political party is having issues within its ranks, there might be one of them that splits off and creates this, and then they're the spoiler. Al Gore had this in 2000 with the Green Party, Ralph Nader and the Green Party in Florida. If Ralph Nader and the Green Party were not there in Florida, majority of those votes would have gone to Al Gore, and there was enough of them that he would have been able to win Florida and not George W. Bush. All right, that is the end of my notes over political parties for U.S. Government. If you have any questions, just let me know.